Before we get cooking, we need to talk chickens, specifically how to buy the right chicken. The most important thing to consider is size. How many pounds per person do you really need? A good rule of thumb is that for every one person, you need about a half pound of chicken. We'd also recommend getting an air-chilled chicken rather than a water-chilled one. While air-chilled chickens are more expensive, they aren't packed with extra water, allowing them to cook more evenly and to stay more moist. Once you have your chicken, it's time to get it prepped. But before we do, you don't need to wash your chicken. This won't rinse away any of the bacteria. You actually run the risk of contaminating other parts of your kitchen. So let's get down to business. The number one key to a crispy chicken is getting it as dry as possible. Using a paper towel, blot the chicken on all sides, including the cavity, until there's no more visible moisture left. Any excess moisture will prevent the chicken from getting that crispy, crackly skin. Once the chicken is dried, generously season the outside, including the underside, with kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. A lot of recipes use herbs and spices to season their chickens, like rosemary, thyme, and sage. But for our recipe, we're keeping it simple. Salt and pepper is all you need. So this next bit may seem a bit unorthodox. Take any pointy implement, we used a toothpick, and poke 20 or so holes all over the chicken, including the legs. The exact number doesn't really matter. Just make sure you cover every bit of the surface. This method lets excess moisture out, guaranteeing you crisp skin. Once you're done, transfer it to a rimmed baking dish and let the chicken rest in the fridge for at least 8 hours to really let the salt work its magic. This is called a dry brine. Salt isn't just for seasoning. This will draw even more moisture from the chicken, tenderizing the meat and really upping the skin's crisp factor. We also tried wet brining our bird, and while the flavor was great, the skin didn't get as crispy as our dry brine, despite it taking even more work. We also tested stuffing the cavity with vegetables and aromatics, but they added excess moisture while roasting, which prevented the chicken from getting crispy. Just before you're ready to take it out, preheat your oven to 450 degrees. Once you take it out of the fridge, let the chicken rest for an hour at room temperature, like you would any other meat. Just before it's time to pop the chicken in the oven, we're going to tie it up or truss it. Trussing your chicken will result in a more evenly cooked bird. Take a piece of butcher's twine. We'd recommend a piece about 3 feet long. Loop the twine around the legs, pulling them together. Then slip each piece of twine under its respective leg. Pull the twine up to the top of the chicken, then flip the whole bird over. Pull the twine under the wings, looping it around the neck, and then tie it off, cutting away any excess twine. Finally, flip the bird back over and tuck the wings under the breasts. And there you go, you're a trussing expert. Now, a rack is the ideal way to roast a chicken. It raises the bird from the base of the pan, allowing excess juices to run off, and lets the heat fully circulate around the chicken, once again ensuring an even cook. Some people prefer roasting their chicken with the breasts down. When we tested this, the meat was super juicy, but the skin was soggy. We're roasting ours breast side up. It gives you that classic roast chicken look, and you'll have succulent meat and great skin. If you don't have a rack, don't worry. Cover a tray with whichever hearty vegetables you want. These will act just like the rack, elevating the chicken from the surface of the tray. Plus, they'll soak up all the flavorful juices and make a really good side dish. Now you're finally ready to roast your chicken. I know 450 seems high. Because the bird is dry brined, the meat is going to be exceptionally juicy. The skin is going to be perfectly crispy. However, the right way to determine its doneness is by taking the temperature. Stick a meat thermometer into the thickest part of the chicken. Once it reads 165, you're good to go. Once your chicken is done, let it rest for at least 20 minutes. To be thorough, we tested roasting a chicken at a slightly lower temperature for a longer time. And while still good, we found the lower heat didn't allow the skin to get as crispy, and the meat started to get dried out. And that's it. You've roasted a chicken, and it's ready to serve. Now, we're going to walk you through how to carve a chicken. It takes some practice, but it's a really useful skill. But first, a quick anatomy lesson. There's the keel bone down the middle, the breasts, drumsticks, and wings. To start, clip the twine from the legs and remove it from the whole bird. To carve off the leg, cut between it and the breast. Another good indicator of the chicken's doneness is if the juices run clear from the cut. When you reach the joint, bend it back and cut right through. To remove the wings, simply twist them right off. Finally, to remove the breasts, cut down along the keel bone, slicing as closely to the bone as you can. Then, angling your knife outwards, remove the breast. So you'll have the breast, wing, and leg, which can be further broken down into a thigh and drumstick if you want. Quick pro tip. If you flip the chicken over, there are two very flavorful small pieces of meat on the bottom called the oysters. You can use your hands to simply pull them out. Save these flavorful bits for yourself. They're a chef's treat. And there you have it. You're now a chicken roasting pro. Impress your friends, impress your family, or even impress yourself. Making a roast chicken is neither hard nor complicated. It just takes time and patience. If you follow our steps, we can guarantee this will be the only roast chicken recipe you'll ever want to make. So say you have a little more time. It's a weeknight, you want a burger, you don't want to have something basic, you want something a little more. That's where this burger comes in. I'm gonna start with pickled red onions, which are really easy to make. You can keep them in the fridge for a few weeks, and they're really gonna amp your burger up. I'm gonna start with water. I'm using apple cider vinegar, but you could use champagne vinegar or white vinegar. You can experiment. I'm gonna add sugar, salt. I like to add some peppercorns and some coriander seeds. I'm gonna bring the brining mixture to a boil. As I stir, I want the sugar and salt to be dissolved. So now that my brine's at a boil, I can actually take it off the heat, add the onions, and just make sure that the onions are fully submerged. I'm gonna let the pickled red onions sit for about 30 minutes. They're gonna cool down, so I'm gonna move on to making my own Thousand Island dressing. Yeah, you could go out buy a whole thing of Thousand Island, but this is gonna be about 1,000,000,000 times better. First, mayonnaise, ketchup, garlic, some chopped pickles, and vinegar. And you just whisk to combine. It's that easy. You have everything in your fridge to make this. Now it's patty time. Add salt, add pepper, and mix it together. I'm going to do a pub style burger. So smash style burgers use about 4 ounces of meat, where a pub burger would use about 6 to 8, so significantly bigger. If you take your thumb and press it in the middle of the burger and kind of make a divot, it'll help that the burger doesn't puff up as you're cooking it. It'll make a more even surface. Whoop. This is ready to go, so I can start to cook it off. Going to heat my pan, add some oil. Like the smash burger, I'm going to toast my buns. Pan is hot, time for my burger. The smash burger cooked really quickly. For the pub style burger, it's a lot more meat. It's gonna take 4 to 5 minutes before I flip. Even though I'm not smashing it down with the spatulas, it's still gonna get that beautiful crust, that Maillard reaction. So once the meat starts to color, you can see halfway up it's starting to get brown. That's a really good indicator that the burger's ready to flip. Ooh, baby! Cheese on top, cook for a few more minutes. That's a burger. Oh, the cheese. Time to build this burger. So I'm starting with the burger. Oh my God, it looks amazing. Add some lettuce, tomato, some pickled onions, and that Thousand Island on top. Damn, that's a burger. First thoughts are just utter excitement. I mean, this looks absolutely insane. Oh my, it's amazing. 30 minutes, magic. I'm overwhelmed. It's crazy that it could get even better than this. Risotto is traditionally made with arborio rice, which is a type of short grain rice. It has a high starch content, which allows it to become creamier once cooked. You can use other types of rice or grains like long grain rice, farro, or barley, but we'd recommend sticking with arborio. There's no hard and fast line when it comes to achieving the ideal consistency. However, a good rule of thumb is for every 1 cup of rice, use 4 to 6 cups of stock. We're using chicken stock, but you can use the stock of your choice, or even hot water in a pinch. We're gonna bring the stock to a boil over high heat. If you add cold stock to your rice, it won't cook through or achieve that ideal creamy texture. As our stock comes to a boil, we need to select the right pot for the risotto. Make sure to use a tall pot. As you continuously add stock, the rice will double in size, and if your pot is too small, it could overflow. Once the stock is boiling, reduce the heat to a simmer, or just keep it close by. The important thing is that the stock stays warm. Bring your risotto pot to the stove and reduce the heat to medium. Now add your oil to the pan. Once the oil's hot, it's time to add your allium of choice. We're going with shallots. If you don't want to use shallots, you can use other alliums, like onions, scallions, or garlic, whichever you prefer. You're going to cook the shallots until they're translucent. At this point, add the mushrooms and butter, cooking down until soft and tender. This is gonna take a little while, so be patient. That's really the theme of this dish. But if you don't like mushrooms, you can skip this step and go straight to adding the rice. Once your mushrooms have cooked down, add the garlic, thyme, salt, and pepper. Again, this is just for an extra boost of flavor, but you can experiment with the seasonings of your choice. Now it's time to add the rice. Stir the rice until it's fully coated with the mushroom mixture. You want to toast the rice, but not burn it. This will take a minute or two. Next, add a splash of wine. This adds a boost of acidity to the dish. If you don't want to use alcohol, you can swap it for lemon juice. When the wine is cooked off, that's the sign it's time to start adding the stock. Word to the wise, patience really is a virtue when it comes to making risotto. You want to add just enough stock to cover the rice, stirring fairly constantly until it's absorbed. Don't try to rush the process by adding more stock. This won't allow the rice to cook evenly and you'll end up with a soupy mess. Continue to add the stock bit by bit until the rice is al dente, which takes about 15 to 20 minutes. You'll know it's done when the rice has just a bit of firmness left in it and the texture is creamy. If you can pull the spoon through the risotto and it slowly oozes back in place, you're done. For extra creaminess and flavor, add some grated Parmesan and stir to combine. And that's it, you're done. Risotto really isn't that complicated. There's a lot of room for experimentation and customization, as long as you remember to abide by the basic principles. Take your time, be patient, follow the rules, and you'll be a risotto master in no time. 30 minutes before you start cooking, you want to take your steak out of the fridge and let it rest at room temperature. If you grab it straight from the fridge and throw a cold steak in a hot pan, it'll bring down the pan's temperature and you won't get that great crust. Next, you want to pat your steak dry with a paper towel. This will absorb any excess moisture that could keep the steak from getting an even crust. So then you want to really generously season the steak with coarse salt and pepper. This might seem like an aggressive amount of seasoning, but you really need that much to get the flavor throughout the steak. And don't forget to cover every side. Next, we're going to sear the steak. For searing, you should use a stainless steel or cast iron pan because they're oven safe and can maintain a high, steady heat, which you need to get a really great crust. Heat the pan over high heat for about 5 minutes. You can actually feel the heat coming off the pan when it's ready. Then we're going to add a neutral oil with a high smoke point. We use grapeseed oil, but you could also use canola, vegetable, or even sunflower oil. Once you see the oil start to shimmer, like this, and it's starting to smoke, that's when you know you're ready to start searing. Place the filet in the pan and let it sit for 2 to 3 minutes without moving it. Seriously, don't move it. That's going to allow it to form this really great crust, also known as that Maillard reaction. After that crust is formed, flip your steak. If it's sticking to the pan, that just means it's not ready yet, and you should let it keep searing until it self-releases. If you really want to enhance the flavor of your steak, you can baste it. To baste, you want to add a couple tablespoons of butter along with some herbs and garlic to the pan. Then you tilt the pan so the butter pools on one side and continuously spoon that herby butter over the steak for 1 to 2 minutes. This process is a really quick step to infuse your steak with even more flavor. Trust us, you should try it. So we're going to finish our steak off in the oven because it's the easiest way to guarantee an even cook. Place the pan in a preheated oven at 450 degrees. 7 minutes will get you a perfectly done medium rare filet, which is what we'd recommend. It should be 130 degrees when you take it out of the oven. After letting it rest, the temperature will go up to 135. If you prefer a different cook, you can adjust the amount of time in the oven. We prefer medium rare because, well, your steak is going to stay really tender and flavorful. Then you want to let it rest at room temperature for about 10 minutes to make sure it stays tender and juicy. If you slice it right away, the juices will run out, which can dry out your steak. When you let it rest, the juices will absorb evenly throughout the steak, keeping it tender. The temperature will continue to rise by about 5 degrees while it's resting. With any steak, you want to slice it against the grain. Filet mignon is already a really tender cut of steak, but this is just an extra tip to make sure it's the best it can be. And that's all it takes. Filet mignon is a really wonderful cut of meat, but it can be pretty intimidating because of its price point. But when you want to splurge, give it a try. It's not fundamentally harder to cook than any other cuts of steak. The same principles apply. And with these few tips in mind, you're guaranteed to get a restaurant-quality steak at home. So if you use too little flour, in this case 2 cups, you end up with a pancake that tastes really great, but it's really flat. Too much flour creates a deceivingly thick pancake. Sure, it looks great, but it lacks flavor and it's really just too dense. I mean, it kind of tastes like eating, like baked flour. No one wants it. We found the sweet spot is 2.5 cups of flour. Your pancakes will be light, fluffy and delicious. Pro tip, make sure you measure the flour correctly by spooning it into the measuring cup and then leveling it with a straight edge. If you scoop the flour directly with the cup or just pack it right in, whatever you make is going to be way too dense. Now, flour isn't the only thing that affects how pillowy your pancakes are. To up their fluff factor, you're gonna need a leavener. Leaveners are those ingredients that allow food to rise when cooking or baking. These are things like yeast, baking powder, and baking soda. If you use only baking soda, your pancakes will rise but taste too soapy. If you use just baking powder, which is a mixture of baking soda and cream of tartar, it'll taste like aluminum foil. We use a mixture of both because when they work together, you'll get the perfect amount of lift from the combination of baking soda, along with the right amount of tang from the cream of tartar and the baking powder. So now that we've got all that settled, let's prep our dry ingredients. This is pretty straightforward. Add the sugar, salt, baking powder, and baking soda to the flour and whisk to combine. Now, there's nothing more classic than using buttermilk for your pancakes. That said, if you find yourself in a pinch, you can actually make your own. It's pretty simple. Just add a few tablespoons of lemon juice or vinegar to whole milk and let it stand for 5 to 10 minutes. Once you see the milk start to curdle, you can use it just like buttermilk. Yeah, up close it looks a little weird. We also did an experiment to see if using buttermilk powder would enhance the fluffiness of our pancakes. And it actually did affect the texture, but the buttermilk flavor was completely lost. Now we're gonna move on to our wet ingredients. Add the buttermilk, melted butter, and egg yolks, and again, whisk together. Yeah, it's a lot of butter, but you're making pancakes. You want them to be buttery and flavorful and delicious. Make your life better with butter. Okay, this seems simple, but this is actually a make or break moment. You're gonna add the buttermilk mixture to the dry ingredients and gently mix it until just combined. I really wanna emphasize to not overmix your batter. That'll result in dense, flat pancakes. You also wanna use a rubber spatula instead of a whisk. That'll help you just gently fold the ingredients together. Now, eggs are the final, super important part of guaranteeing that you'll achieve picture-perfect fluffy pancakes. I cannot stress this enough. They're also the most debated. We found that adding a whole egg all at once doesn't actually result in any fluffiness. You should add the egg white separate from the egg yolk, because on its own, the egg white has different properties than if you were to add the whole egg all at once. The most popular method is to add the egg yolk to the batter, then beat the separated white into soft peaks before folding it in. This does work, but we actually found that you can save yourself some time by adding the separated, unbeaten egg white on its own to get a pancake that's just as fluffy. I mean, who really wants to break out the hand mixer at 7 a.m.? Am I right? Now we're gonna add the unwhipped egg white on its own. And again, fold it until just combined. You don't wanna see any of that snotty egg, but you also don't want it to be too mixed in. This may look undermixed, but some lumps and small pockets of flour are actually what you want the batter to look like. At this point, let the batter rest for 15 to 30 minutes so all the ingredients can really get to know each other. While it may not seem super important, the pan you use can radically impact how your pancakes look. You can absolutely use a nonstick pan if you want. Its smooth surface will guarantee that your pancakes are flat and uniform. However, we prefer a cast iron. The rough surface of the cast iron will give your pancakes these glorious craggy pockets, perfect for soaking up all that butter and syrup you're gonna put on top. Set your pan over medium heat with a tablespoon of butter. Yes, more butter. You can use oil if you want to, but it'll make your pancakes taste more like a donut rather than a pancake, which is fine if, that's your thing. Once the butter melts and starts to bubble, turn the heat down to medium-low to ensure that everything cooks evenly. We found that a hefty 1/3 cup of batter gives us the ideal size pancakes, but you can make them as big or as small as you want. This is also the time for you to customize your pancakes with blueberries, chocolate chips, whatever you want. I'm a berry type of girl myself, but you can go crazy. So after a few minutes, you're gonna start to see these bubbles pop up on the surface. That's your green light to flip your pancake. Don't be discouraged if your first pancake doesn't look great. It usually takes a few tries. And no one has to know. It's a snack just for you. You don't need to let the pancake cook for too long on the side since it did most of the cooking before you flipped it. Just a minute or two to get that golden brown bottom. That's pretty much it. We like ours with more butter, shocker, it's tasty, and lots of maple syrup. And there you have it. You've got yourself the perfect stack of fluffy buttermilk pancakes. Sure, they aren't the most complicated thing to make, and don't take that long, but if you really want to upgrade your weekend, skip the box mix. Take the extra time to follow these steps we've taught you, and we can guarantee that they'll be some of the best pancakes you've ever had. We mean it. We can't stop making them. Every good cheesecake starts with a SPRINGFORM pan. Greasing the pan with nonstick spray or butter is going to help easy removal and help prevent cracking down the line. Adding a band of parchment paper will ensure you've got those smooth, picture-perfect sides when you go to remove the springform. The foundation of cheesecake is the crust. It only requires 3 ingredients to make a classic graham cracker crust. This is the simplest part of the recipe. The combination of sugar and butter helps hold everything together for a really fantastic crust. Some people like using other types of cookies. You can easily swap it in right here. We're gonna do a bottom crust only. Some people like the crust on the sides. It's totally a matter of preference. Just use a flat surface to spread the graham cracker mixture into an even layer. Now you're gonna bake it for 8 to 10 minutes until it's golden brown, and just let it cool as you prepare the filling. Now, it looks like a lot of dairy, but remember, it's a rich, velvety dessert. You really need it here. We're adding full-fat cream cheese here. This is not the time to skimp with reduced fat. I know it looks like a lot of sugar. It is. We tried to reduce it, but you really miss out on some of that classic cheesecake flavor. Make sure all your ingredients are at room temperature before getting started. This way, they'll be easier to mix and give you a smooth cheesecake without any lumps. We're adding a bit of heavy cream. It's a subtle difference, but it's gonna help smooth out the batter. It's a personal preference and you can omit it, but we wouldn't. I'm adding in sour cream for a bit of added tang, and I'm also going to add some flour, which is gonna help bind the cheesecake together and help prevent cracks. To flavor the cake, I'm using whole vanilla bean. A really easy way to remove the seeds is by splitting it down the middle lengthwise, and use the blade of your knife to slowly scrape the seeds out. While you can use vanilla extract in a pinch, the intense flavor of a bean is really hard to beat. Eggs are crucial in any baked cheesecake. They add in creaminess and also help bind the cheesecake together as it bakes. Some recipes will call for adding extra egg yolks. We found in testing that this makes a denser cheesecake, so for our airy version, we're sticking with whole eggs only. So add in the eggs one at a time. If you dump them in all at once, you run the risk of having a really lumpy batter. Okay, so this part is crucial. As soon as the eggs are incorporated, stop mixing. Overmixing can result in a really dense cheesecake. You also want to be scraping your bowl down to ensure everything is thoroughly mixed. From here, it's really easy. Just pour the batter onto the cooled crust and smooth out the top. If we didn't bake the crust, it would mix in with the batter. Who wants that? Even cooking and cracking is a huge concern when making cheesecake. One of the best ways to prevent that is to use a water bath while baking. Even though the pan is sealed, there could be a slight opening where water could get through and give you a soggy crust. To prevent any water from seeping in, we're going to wrap our springform in 2 sheets of foil to really seal it. Place the pan in a large, heavy baking dish and fill it with hot water about 1 inch up the sides of the pan. The hot water creates a moist environment in an otherwise dry oven, so the cheesecake doesn't split from drying out. There are several methods where you can start your cheesecake in a hot oven and then lower the temperature. While you do get some lift, you also run the risk of burning or cracking your cheesecake. For our recipe, we're going to do a steady, moderate heat all the way through. Then, turn the heat off and leave the cheesecake in the oven for another hour to finish baking. Allowing the cake to sit in the oven allows it for it to be fully set in the middle and get a little bit of color. You can see that the cake that was taken out after an hour isn't fully cooked and looks like a gloopy mess. Sometimes cracks happen. There are so many reasons that can cause a crack, such as high temperature, overmixing, no water bath. But this doesn't mean that you can't end up with a beautiful, delicious cheesecake in the end. A great way to cover up a cracked cheesecake is to make a sour cream topping. This topping is really simple. It's just sour cream, sugar, and vanilla extract all mixed together. It not only covers up the crack, but it's also really delicious and can be used on uncracked cheesecakes as well. For a sour cream topping, you don't need a water bath. Just bake it for 10 to 15 minutes just so the top is set, and continue the recipe as normal. After sitting in the oven for another hour, the cheesecake needs to cool at room temperature. Another way to prevent cracks is to gently go around the rim of the cheesecake with a knife. At this point, the center of the cheesecake should still have a slight jiggle, just like this. Once the cheesecake is cooled, place it in the fridge, covered with plastic wrap to fully set. Ideally overnight, but you can still get a really good result in about 4 hours. To remove the cheesecake from the pan, unlatch the side of the springform and carefully lift off the frame. Gently peel back the parchment and you're gonna see those beautiful smooth sides. There's such a wide variety of toppings you can add to your cheesecake, but for ours, we're gonna keep it simple with a ton of fresh berries. To get the perfect slice, fill a large vessel with hot water. Dip your knife into the water, then gently pat it dry before slicing. The hot knife will ensure that you get a smooth cut every time.
Oh, yes!